Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. There's a specific kind of smell that clings to hospital corridors. Antiseptic, stale coffee, something faintly metallic. But on that Tuesday morning, all I could smell was designer perfume. She came clicking down the hall like it was a fashion runway, not the billing office of Mid-River Health. Stilettos, tight blazer, red lipstick at 8 in the damn morning. Brianna Carter, 27, brand new title, Operations Strategist. Translation: CEO's daughter with too much power and not a clue what she was doing. I was buried in the Medicare reimbursement audit when she strolled in like she owned the place. Technically, she kind of did. You need to process a $250,000 consulting payment, she said, dropping a printed invoice on my desk. Infrastructure analysis, priority. Quick note: before we start, how's your day going and where are you joining from? I picked up the paper. No vendor name. Just a wire transfer number and a line that said Strategic Advisory Retainer. No contract, no justification, no routing through procurement, just her signature at the bottom in fat blue ink. This doesn't have a vendor profile, I said, not even looking up yet. And it's over the reporting threshold. I need documentation, contract, scope of work, CFO sign-off. She smiled, or smirked, hard to tell under all the lip filler. My dad signed off, verbally. Then your dad can email me, but I'm not processing a $250,000 payment without anything on paper. She leaned in. You're really going to make this hard? No, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm just following protocol. She stepped back, crossed her arms, and looked me up and down like I was gum on her shoe. You know you're replaceable, right? I stood up. My heart was pounding, but I didn't let it show. Then I guess tomorrow will be interesting. Her expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker. Surprise, maybe, or just irritation that I didn't fold. She grabbed the paper off my desk and turned on her heel, heels clicking like gunshots as she stormed out. That should have been the end of it. But it didn't feel like some overconfident junior exec throwing her weight around. The amount, the vagueness, the pressure, it felt like a test or a trap. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Couldn't sleep. My job might be gone in the morning, but I couldn't stop thinking about that money. What the hell was she trying to move that fast and that quiet? The next morning, my inbox pinged at 8:14 sharp. Please report to Mr. Carter's office, now. No signature, no subject line. Just the kind of email you don't ignore. I didn't waste time pretending I didn't know what this was. I grabbed my badge, slid it into my blazer pocket, and walked the 30 feet to the executive suite without saying a word to anyone. Thomas Carter's assistant didn't even look up when I stepped in. She just tilted her head toward the closed door. I pushed it open. Brianna was already there, perched on the edge of the conference table like it was a bar stool. She had that same smug little half smile. Thomas Carter stood behind his desk, arms folded like he was disappointed in a child. A thick folder sat on the table between them. Ava, he said, not even offering a seat. Let's keep this brief. I didn't sit. We've reviewed some concerning behaviors, he continued, opening the folder like it proved something. Disrupting payment flows, undermining chain of command authority, eroding operational trust. That last phrase was said with extra weight, scripted, planned. You're terminating me, I said flatly. Effective immediately, Brianna cut in. Per HR policy, your access has been revoked. Your personal items will be sent to your home. I looked straight at her. You're awfully invested for an operations strategist. She smiled wider. I believe in accountability. I didn't blink. So do I. Thomas motioned to someone behind me. I turned just as a security guard stepped through the door. Late 30s. Looked almost apologetic. I'll walk you out, he said quietly. I nodded once and turned toward the hall without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I wasn't about to give either of them the satisfaction. He didn't cuff me, didn't touch me, just followed me to the elevator like I was radioactive. I kept my chin up the whole ride down. 15 minutes later, I was sitting at the cafe across the street with a bitter black coffee and no job. At 9:52, two uniformed cops walked through the glass doors of Mid-River HQ. I froze, cup halfway to my mouth. Text from Jenna, front desk. Police just asked for Thomas. They got paperwork. Serious tone. I watched through the cafe window as Thomas led them into the boardroom off the main lobby. It was all glass, no hiding. A minute later, Brianna appeared. She looked thrown, like she hadn't known they were coming. The cops were calm, talking but scanning. One of them had a manila envelope. I leaned forward in my seat, heart thudding. I remembered the payments I'd flagged before, the ones that didn't go through because I pushed back. 7 grand to an art therapy consultant Brianna met at some fundraiser. 18,000 for a rural outreach strategy from a shell firm registered less than 2 weeks earlier. I'd saved them all, not out of paranoia, just habit, names, amounts, dates, tucked into a folder labeled pending review. I'd been in this job long enough to know when something didn't smell right. Inside that glass-walled room, Brianna was pacing now, arms crossed. Thomas stayed still, talking, nodding, but I could see it. The shift, control slipping. The cop slid a document across the table. Thomas didn't touch it. Another text. Jenna again. It's real. Officers took printed emails and vendor files from finance, said it's part of an inquiry. My palms went sweaty. I hadn't tipped the cops, I wasn't the whistleblower. But somebody had. I opened my laptop and plugged in the encrypted drive I kept in my bag. I hadn't looked at it in weeks, but it was all there. Every weird invoice, every payment request I froze, every sketchy vendor Brianna tried to shove through. I stared through the window at the boardroom and waited. The officers didn't leave. I stayed in that cafe for almost an hour, half draining my coffee while my eyes locked on the boardroom across the street. The glass made it easy to track every movement. 2 cops, one seated, one standing near the door, watching. Thomas still talked with his hands, but his back was stiffer. Brianna kept fiddling with her phone and looking toward the hallway like someone was going to bust in any second. Another ping. Jenna. They took paper records, vendor files, printed emails, whole stack of stuff from accounting. I exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding my breath since yesterday. I cracked my knuckles and turned my attention back to my screen. The encrypted drive opened fast, clean folder layout. One labeled Internal Escalations. I clicked it open. There they were. Every time I'd said no, every time I'd asked for real documentation and got the eye roll or the smug smirk or the "just do it, Eva." 7,000 to that so-called art therapy consultant Brianna dragged in after the charity gala. No license, no invoice formatting, just a Google Doc with her Venmo ID and the phrase healing spaces. 18 grand to a firm called Rural Bridge Dynamics, supposedly to build outreach strategy for underserved counties. Registered 10 days before the payment request, no actual service delivered. I wasn't new to this game. I had names, I had dates, I had the original email threads where I asked for clarification and never got it. I tagged every single one of them. Another text from Jenna. Board emergency meeting just called. All directors. CEO's assistant looks white as a ghost. I stared at that message for a second. Emergency meetings didn't happen for bad audits. This was bigger. Blogs started popping up on my second screen. Healthcare threads I followed. First just murmurs, then specifics. Sources claim misused Medicaid funds at Mid-River Health. Anonymous report may have triggered preliminary investigation. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I hadn't spoken to the press. I hadn't gone to the cops. But somebody had. Someone with access. Maybe someone inside finance finally snapped. Or maybe one of the vendors realized they were a front for something dirty. Whatever it wasn't about me anymore. But I was ready. The boardroom went quiet for a few minutes. Everyone inside sat still. Brianna looked cornered, eyes flicking from her dad to the cop to the exit. Thomas just stared at the center of the table, jaw locked. I shut the laptop, slid the drive back into the lining of my bag. I didn't know what was coming next, but whatever it was, I had the one thing they couldn't erase. Receipts. 2 mornings later, my phone rang at 7:12 a.m. No caller ID. I let it buzz once before answering. Eva, it's Marshall Dean. We need to talk. His voice was clipped. Lawyer tone. No small talk. Where? There's a place near the courthouse. Poppy's Cafe. Be there in 30. He hung up. I showed up early. He showed up earlier. Blue suit, eyes tired, already sweating through the collar. He didn't order anything. Just sat down and slid a thin folder across the table like it was poisoned. What is this? You're being named in the internal review, he said. Allegations include non-compliance with executive directives and possible unauthorized communication with law enforcement. I didn't touch the folder. You serious right now? I'm not the one writing this crap, he said, but you need to see what they're building. I opened it. The first memo had Thomas Carter's name at the top. The subject line hit me in the chest. Concerning conduct. Eva Morris. It was dated 4 weeks ago. I skimmed. He claimed I'd intentionally obstructed approved operational workflows and failed to support enterprise-level initiatives. CC'd to the compliance committee. He'd written the setup weeks before they fired me. The next memo was even worse. Brianna's signature this time. It accused me of aggressively resisting policy implementation directives and repeatedly questioning strategic expenditures. This is fiction, I said, flipping the page hard. I know, Marshall said, keeping his voice low. But this isn't about facts anymore. They're trying to make you radioactive. No hospital will touch you if this gets out. I looked him dead in the eye. So you called me here to scare me? No, he said. I called you here because I know the difference between CYA protocol and a coordinated takedown. This is the latter. I leaned back, brain racing. They were setting me up as the problem. The leaker, the one who didn't play ball. So what do you want from me? Don't go to the press. Not yet. Don't escalate. Don't give them the reaction they want. I didn't answer. I just closed the folder and slid it back across the table. As soon as I left, I started dialing. Procurement contacts, audit team folks who'd left in the last 18 months. A few had moved out of state. One was working private sector now. I asked every one of them the same question. Did you ever push back on something that felt off? The answers were all different versions of the same story. Sketchy vendor requests, weird last-minute approvals, sudden pressure to process big payouts. And then, like clockwork, performance concerns, and quick exits. I started making a list. Names, dates, positions. Every one of them had been labeled non-collaborative before they were gone. Midway through that list, my phone buzzed again. Tip from Jenna. HR is working on a press statement naming you, something about violating internal confidentiality. I stared at the message for a long second, then wrote back, "Can you get me a copy?" She replied with just 2 words, "Already trying." I opened my laptop, pulled up my own files again, and started digging. This wasn't just about proving I didn't leak anything. It was about proving who did. I sent the text that afternoon. Me. Need 5 minutes. Just us. Discreet. Nadine Kelly. About what? Me. Check all $25,000 plus payments this year, especially ones Brianna approved without documentation. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Her voice was flat. Where? Garrison Wine Bar, 6 o'clock. Back booth. She didn't confirm. She just hung up. I showed up early again, flash drive zipped in a side pocket. The place was quiet, half-lit, mostly empty. No one from Mid-River in sight. Nadine slipped in like she was dodging cameras. No makeup, hoodie, sunglasses on her head. I waved her over. She didn't sit right away. This better not be some paranoid rant. Sit down, I said. You're going to want to see this. She slid into the booth and crossed her arms. I didn't explain. I just pulled the drive from my pocket and set it on the table. That's everything I flagged in the last 9 months. Ghost vendors, no deliverables, same routing bank over and over. You think I can plug this into my work machine? She asked, already annoyed. Number, I think you can borrow a clean laptop and check the ledger like I told you. Look at the payout history. Look at the dates, the signatures. She hesitated, then grabbed the drive and tucked it under her hand. I leaned in. I don't need you to go to war. Just verify it's real. Quietly. She stared at me like she was trying to decide if I was bluffing. And if it is real, then you've got criminal exposure sitting in your accounts payable system. And a whole board that's about to pretend they never knew a damn thing. She didn't answer, just pulled out her phone and scrolled for a second, then looked up again. You're saying these are approved payments? Some were rushed through with verbal sign-off. Some were rubber-stamped by Brianna. All over $25,000. No backup, no paper trail. Same bank over and over again. Small outfit in Delaware. Start there. She finally looked rattled. This isn't just bad, she said. If this is real, this is criminal. I nodded once. Now you're speaking my language. She didn't finish her drink, didn't even touch it. Just stood up and left with the flash drive in her fist. I watched her go without saying anything. As soon as Nadine left the wine bar, I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to Dr. Neil Monroe. He was the only board member I trusted, old school, smart, and not up anyone's ass. We'd worked together when Mid-River launched the rural clinics 5 years back. He actually read contracts, he noticed details, and he never played dumb when something smelled off. I didn't send any files, no documents, just one text. Are you aware of unvetted vendors being hired under family authority? He called within 45 minutes. Ava, what the hell am I reading? I kept my voice low. Not proof, just a question. You're saying the Carters bypassed procurement? I'm saying if you compare recent payment logs to active vendor contracts, you'll see things that don't line up, especially anything over $25,000. Start there. He didn't push, just said, I'll look, and hung up. By that night, Nadine texted me a single word: verified. She didn't need to explain. I knew what that meant. She'd started pulling records, quietly, off network, if she was smart. The next day, I stayed glued to my phone. Jenna fed me scraps from inside. Brianna's not speaking. Her dad's pacing like a dog in a cage. Compliance team meeting just broke early. Nadine looked pale. I didn't smile. I didn't breathe easier. I just kept checking the encrypted drive and waiting for someone to push harder. They did. Monday morning, I got the call. Block number. Male voice, smooth, polished. Miss Morris, this is Kenneth Rowe, retained settlement counsel for Mid-River Health. Do you have a moment? Go ahead. We'd like to offer you a confidential severance package in recognition of your prior service. 6 months pay, non-disparagement clause, mutual release. I let that sit a second. So, hush money. Not at all, he said quickly. Just a professional separation. Both parties move forward. Let me save you some time, I said. Unless you retract every lie you put on paper about me, there's nothing to talk about. Ava, may I call you Eva? No, he hesitated. We're trying to avoid unnecessary attention. Then maybe you shouldn't have framed your own employee while funneling fake vendor money through a hospital network. Silence. I waited 2 beats, then ended it. Don't call again unless it's to apologize. In writing, I hung up and dropped the phone on the table. They were sweating. Good. I opened my laptop and checked the internal memo timestamp Nadine had sent. Sunday night, 11:47 p.m. She'd already submitted a quiet audit request to the finance subcommittee. No names. Just inconsistencies flagged for urgent preliminary review. The fuse was lit. Now I waited for the bang. Wednesday morning, my phone rang at 8:03. Block number again, but this time it wasn't a lawyer. This is Helen Ward, counsel to the Mid-River Board. The finance subcommittee is meeting today with external auditors. They'd like you to testify as a witness. I didn't say yes right away. I have conditions. There was a pause. Okay. 1. Full anti-retaliation clause, signed and notarized. Understood. 2. Written confirmation that my termination was not based on misconduct. I want it entered into the board record. Another pause. We'll draft the language. Will you attend? I'll be there at 11. I hung up and closed my eyes for a second, just long enough to reset my breathing. By 10:40, I was outside the side conference room on the 3rd floor. Jenna had walked me through the service corridor, so I didn't have to cross the main lobby. At 11 o'clock sharp, the door opened. A woman in a gray blazer nodded me in. The room wasn't huge, but it was full. 7 board members, 2 external auditors, legal counsel, and Nadine at the far end, eyes locked on the table. Helen Ward sat to the right. She motioned to the open seat. I walked in like I belonged there, calm, not smug, just ready. Helen started. Ava, please state your position and reason for appearing. My name is Eva Morris. Until last week, I was Mid-River's Director of Reimbursement Integrity under the Billing and Revenue Department. I was fired for refusing to process an unverified payment of $250,000 to an unnamed infrastructure consultant. I took out a printed document and slid it forward. This is the original request, signed only by Brianna Carter. No contract, no vendor profile, no supporting documentation. One of the auditors spoke up. Was there any verbal justification? She said her father had approved it verbally. And your response? I asked for it in writing. I was fired the next morning. Helen's pen scratched quietly. Did you report this through official channels? I did. Anonymously through the board's ethics hotline. I did not contact law enforcement. Nadine finally spoke. That hotline report came in 10 days ago. We've traced the metadata. It checks out. The auditors started flipping through their binders. One of them, Burke, I think, looked at me over the rim of his glasses. We reviewed the vendor data you helped surface. 6 separate LLCs, none with valid W-9s, none with service logs or deliverables, all traced back to the same corporate formation agent. Helen leaned forward. Whose agent? Burke didn't hesitate. Used almost exclusively by the Carter family office in Wilmington, Brianna Carter signed 4 of the 6 payout approvals. Another board member, a man I didn't know, circled something on his notepad. And Thomas Carter? His signature's not on the payment files, but he greenlit the budget increases that allowed the transactions. The routing approvals trace back to his office. Silence stretched for a beat. Helen turned to me. Ava, thank you. That's all we need for today. I stood up, nodded once, and walked out the same way I came in. Not a single person stopped me. My phone buzzed again just after 6 p.m. Helen Ward. The board requests your presence tomorrow morning, she said. Bring the records you mentioned, the hard copies. They know what they're asking for? I asked. They do now. I didn't sleep much that night, spent most of it at the dining room table, organizing everything into labeled folders. One for each vendor, each shell company, each red flag. I didn't need to speak in paragraphs, I just needed to show the numbers. At 10:58 a.m., I walked back into the same side conference room. This time, it wasn't just the subcommittee, the full board was there. Legal, the auditors, Nadine again. Brianna sat against the wall, arms folded, face like granite. Thomas Carter was at the head of the table. I dropped the file box on the table and started handing out folders. Everything in here ties to Mid-River's European procurement activity, I said. Over the last 13 months? I pointed to the first tab. The company listed as the primary equipment broker, Redwell Trade Services, is based in Dublin. No active office. Registered to a P.O. box. I moved to the second tab. Solera Global Holdings, out of the Caymans. Invoiced Mid-River for consulting on vendor negotiations. No documentation, no travel logs, no meeting minutes. One of the auditors, Burke, flipped through the paperwork, highlighter already in hand. These were processed as part of the rural expansion equipment purchase? He asked. Correct. They were marked as vendor support and logistics. But no one in operations ever worked with them. No deliverables. No emails beyond billing. Helen spoke without looking up. Who owns these entities? I answered flatly. Both trace back to a former business partner of Thomas Carter. Name's Charles Halford. He's worked as a formation agent for the Carter family office for over a decade. Thomas leaned forward. I have no knowledge of those contracts. Burke looked up. They were routed through your budget. Approvals were decentralized during the expansion. Delegated authority. That's standard practice. No, I said. What standard practice is having a contract file and at least one service log? These don't have either. Thomas turned to the board. This is a setup. I opened one last folder and slid a printout across the table to Helen. This is an email from Thomas Carter to his executive assistant, dated March 3rd. It reads, Use the family trusted vendor for all overseas consulting. Redwell's clean. Stick with them. Silence dropped like a weight. One of the board members, Tricia Dolan, scribbled something in her notebook and said, Burke, what's the damage? He looked at his audit sheet. Cross-referenced and confirmed. $3.4 million. Spent or stolen? Another board member asked. Billed. No service records. It's missing. Thomas stood up. This is political. This is a witch hunt built on coincidence. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. Helen raised her hand. We've heard enough. She turned to the board. Motion on the table. Immediate termination of Thomas Carter as CEO. Cause, ethical misconduct and financial mismanagement. Do we have a second? 3 hands shot up. Then 4 more. Helen didn't wait. Motion passed. Effective immediately. Thomas stared down at the table like he'd been punched in the throat. Helen continued. Next item, Brianna Carter. Grounds, unethical directives, policy circumvention, vendor fraud. Another vote. Another unanimous pass. No one stood up. No one argued. Brianna didn't speak. She just sat there, blinking like someone had unplugged her. Thomas looked at her, then at me, then at the door. I watched them both get up and walk out. Helen Ward asked to meet me the next morning. We sat in a small conference room on the second floor, quiet, window cracked for air. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept. But she was composed. That kind of lawyer calm that doesn't crack, even after they've helped fire a CEO. She took out 2 pieces of paper, slid them across the table. The board's issuing a formal correction of your personnel record, she said, retroactively. It'll state you were wrongfully terminated and acted in good faith to preserve financial compliance. I skimmed the wording. Clear. No hedging, no vague phrasing. About time. There's more, she added. Several board members would like to extend an offer. Director-level compliance oversight. You'd report to the board, not the executive office. I leaned back in my chair. That's a nice reversal considering I was accused of eroding operational trust 5 days ago. Helen didn't smile, but her expression softened. You forced accountability. That's worth something. I nodded slowly. I'm not saying no. But I wasn't fighting for a job, I said. I was fighting for the truth. She folded her hands. They'll wait for your answer? By noon, the board released a formal statement to media outlets. Direct and sharp, Thomas and Brianna Carter named for multiple violations of fiduciary responsibility and abuse of authority in vendor contracting. The phrase internal fraud was used plainly. By 3 p.m., my phone was blowing up. Industry blogs picked it up first, then the health policy networks, then a local news site ran the headline, Mid-River fires CEO, daughter over multi-million-dollar billing scheme. A former colleague from a different hospital texted, "That was your audit trail, wasn't it?" Jesus, you just blew up half the C-suite. I didn't answer. By evening, Mid-River issued a second statement, saying they were cooperating with authorities, launching a full external review, and re-examining all executive-level transactions from the past 2 years. They didn't name me, but I didn't need them to. Around 7 p.m., I got a call I didn't expect. Michelle Tan. She was a senior administrator with the Marshridge Clinic Network, our biggest rural clinic partner. We'd worked on half a dozen Medicaid reimbursement cases together over the last 2 years. Ava, she said, is the hospital safe now? Her voice wasn't accusatory, just tired, like she needed to believe the answer. I didn't rush it. It's on its way there, she let out a breath. We're keeping the contract. Good, I said, because the patients deserve better than what they almost walked us into. She didn't argue. We said our goodbyes. I hung up and stood by the window, watching the sun drop behind the admin building's roofline. Mid-River didn't collapse, but it had come damn close. I brought the last file in person. Thick folder, labeled tabs, wire transfers, shell formations, overseas routing codes. These weren't Brianna's mess. They belonged to her father, and they ran deep. The board called one final meeting, this time in the main boardroom. Thomas was there, gray around the eyes, suit still pressed, but nothing behind the posture. Brianna wasn't invited. Helen Ward stood near the head of the table, arms crossed, watching. I took my seat, slid the folder to the center. These were labeled as procurement contracts for European diagnostic equipment, I said. But the payments were split into multiple small transfers, routed through Revastra Holdings, based in Switzerland. Nadine opened the first document and froze. This isn't tied to any of the flagged vendors we've already identified. No, I said. It's new, and it goes back 18 months. Burke, the lead auditor, flipped to the bank record index. Who owns Revastra? Registered under a shelf company, held by an investment trust. That trust links directly to a private equity portfolio owned by, I paused, Thomas Carter. All heads turned. No one said a word. Thomas finally spoke. These were strategic placements, temporary pass-throughs for international equipment partners. Burke didn't blink. They billed for installation labor, $17,000 per unit. None of the units were installed. Thomas leaned back in his chair. The contracts were performance-based. Delays happen. Then show us the delivery logs, Helen said flatly. He didn't answer. I reached into my bag, pulled one last sheet, and placed it down. Email from Thomas to procurement. Use Revastra again. Family trusted, fast routing. Dated February 2nd. Helen circled the quote in red ink. This completes the pattern, she said, and takes it out of internal discipline. The room was quiet except for the hum of the overhead lights. Then Burke stood. We recommend immediate legal action and referral to federal authorities. Helen turned to the board. All in favor? Every hand went up. By 2 p.m., the public statement went live. Mid-River Health confirms legal action against former CEO Thomas Carter related to ongoing fraud investigation. We thank Eva Morris for maintaining ethical boundaries under pressure. At 3:41, Michelle Tan called again. You did the right thing, she said. And you did it quietly. We'll keep our contract. I gave a tired laugh. That's the best kind of win. I didn't go out, didn't celebrate. I just packed my bag and walked home in the late summer rain. Shoes soaked, hair dripping, no umbrella. I didn't burn the system down. I just held the match while they poured the gas.